So what would be really wonderful at this point is the straight scoop from our public health professionals. What information do they lack? What information do they need? And what information, when input into their thought-making processes, would lead to what sort of solutions? And we're not getting any of that. Honestly, I think Dr. Fauci is great in a lot of ways. This is one area where I think he has really been bereft. I think the same thing is true basically of Dr. Birx. I think that our public health professionals need to be fully honest with us as to what they don't know. Now, I think that they are saying it, right? I think that in their writings, they're saying it. I think that when they speak long form, they're saying it. But I think that they need to be saying, listen, right now, like, be honest with us. Just be honest, okay? Here's the data we're missing. Here's the data we need. We can't make a decision to reopen until we have this data. That's what's happening here, right? So Dr. Fauci said over the weekend, this has been his constant refrain, that the virus decides when we reopen. That's not true. We decide when we reopen, right? We do. Now, we could make a horrible decision. We could make a great decision, but we are the ones who decide. We take in all the virus doesn't decide a damn thing. The virus is not a decision-making tool, right? The virus is not the one who's sitting in the White House. The virus is not. The virus is a horrible, horrible thing that is happening right now, and we are going to have to deal with that and the other horrible thing that's happening right now, which is the destruction of tens of millions of American jobs and hundreds of thousands of American businesses. We are going to have to make those calls, and I think it is, frankly, I think it's manifestly irresponsible for people to consistently go around saying things like, it's going to become eminently clear when we can reopen based on the virus. No, it is not. If it were, then Europe wouldn't be struggling with it right now. China wouldn't be struggling. Singapore wouldn't be struggling. Everyone is struggling with this right now. You know why? Because these are tough decisions, and there are no good answers. Sometimes all the answers are crappy. The kind of ease, like this annoys me. The virus is not making the decision. Now, I know what Fauci is trying to say, which is that we don't have enough data. So just say that. Say we don't have enough data. Once we have the data, then we can start making some tough calls about what is the best possible way for us to decide between risk to life on the one hand and risk to quality of life and freedom, which turns out is kind of an important thing in America. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't want to live like this for another 18 months. I don't think many people do. Anyway, here's Dr. Fauci suggesting the virus decides when we reopen.
The virus kind of decides whether or not it's going to be appropriate to open or not. What we're seeing right now are some favorable signs, as I've discussed with you a few times on this show. It's looking like that in many cases, particularly in New York, we're starting to see a flattening and a turning around. I would want to see a clear indication that you are very, very clearly and strongly going in the right direction. Because the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to get out there prematurely and then wind up your back in the same situation.
Right. Of course, nobody wants that, but that presumably is why you're ramping up the ICU beds, why you're ramping up the ventilators, why you're ramping up the treatments. And again, nobody has offered a path out of this that doesn't involve second wave infections, barring massive testing regimes. Like, I'm still confused about that particular policy. Okay. Like, there's been a lot of talk about we need massive testing and then we need contact tracing. Is that realistic? I mean, serious question. Is that realistic? Are we going to have tests available, like now, on demand, 5-minute tests that can test you for antibodies? Because you don't have to have a fever. You don't have to be running a fever to be carrying coronavirus. Are we going to test everybody like once a day, once every 2 days, 300 million people, 165 million people in the workforce? Like, what does that actually look like? Is that a realistic thing? Or do we wait for the symptoms to crop up? And once the symptoms crop up, then we go back and we trace every contact that you've had over the past 2 weeks. At which point, in places like New York, it's going to be a little bit too late. Right? That may be possible in some smaller areas that are more spread out. That is not nearly possible in New York, as they've found out. Now, Fauci then adds to that, loosening restrictions can get us infected again. Yes, I know. So how do you plan to accomplish this thing?
If you start, and when one starts, to relax some of those restrictions, we know that there will be people who will be getting infected. I mean, that is just reality. The critical issue is to be able to, in real time, identify, isolate, and contact trace. That's called containment. Right now, in places like New Orleans and in New York City, we're in mitigation. So, I have confidence that with the help that we can do federally, from the federal government, to the fact that the states are really committed to doing it right, I think that combination, hopefully, is going to get us to where we want to be.
Okay, where we want to be is the question. What does where we want to be look like? So Fauci finally is asked this question, and he says, well, I hope maybe next month the country can take some steps to reopen. What the hell does that? Okay, so what does that look like? Can we hear it? Like, what's the plan? What's the plan?
I think it could probably start, at least in some ways, maybe next month, And again, Jake, it's so difficult to make those kinds of predictions because they always get thrown back at you if it doesn't happen. Not by you, but, by any of a number of people. We are hoping that at the end of the month, we could look around and say, okay, is there any element here that we can safely and cautiously start pulling back on? If so, do it. If not, then just continue to hunker down.
Okay, so what does that even look like? What does that even look like? Okay, and then Fauci says, I hope voters will be able to go to the polls in November. Based on what? Okay, we've not even heard a plan. What the hell are we talking about? Like, I'm fine with a plan. Can we have a plan? I feel like giving the Joker speech in The Dark Knight, right? Everybody's okay so long as there's a plan. We need an app, but he's right. I mean, like, we actually need some form of plan here, and we need to know how realistic the plan is. It can't just be people screaming widespread testing and contact tracing. Yes, I can say those words too. It's magical, but that doesn't solve anything. What system is going to be in place to make this stuff happen? Here's Fauci saying he hopes voters will be able to go to the polls in November. So he's already said he thinks that schools could open in September and polls could be open in November. How? Okay, let me, really, how? My kids, as I've said before, are 6 and 3. Do you think my kid is going to wear a mask in the classroom, my 3-year-old? I can't even get the kid to wear pants. You think he's going to wear a mask in the classroom? It's not going to happen. Okay, like I took him to the doctor recently, and they asked him to wear a mask. And the first thing he did was he reached off and he pulled the mask, and I put it back on. He pulled it off, and I put it on. You think you're going to be able to do it with classrooms full of 4-year-olds? How? And then here's Fauci saying that he hopes that we'll be able to go to the polls in November. Listen, I hope lots of things. I do. But how about your inputs? How about how we are making these decisions? It is frankly annoying to me that nobody is even asking the question as to how these decisions get made. What metrics are you using? What additional data do you need? Tell me so we can help. And don't tell me the only way to help is just to stay home, because I don't think that's right. You're asking people to give up their livelihoods for good in order for you to not have any sort of plan, in order for you not to tell us how the formula works. Here's Fauci saying that he hopes voters will be able to go to the polls in November.
I hope so, Jake. I can't guarantee it. I believe that if we have a good, measured way of rolling into this steps towards normality, that we hope by the time we get to November that we'll be able to do it in a way which is the standard way. However, and I don't want to be the pessimistic person, there is always a possibility as we get into next fall and the beginning of early winter, that we could see a rebound.
Okay, so, I mean, all right. Thanks for this complete level of uncertainty. Now, again, if there's uncertainty, you're the expert. Tell us how we alleviate the uncertainty. That's what experts do. Right? Experts don't just say, I know the level of uncertainty. They say, here's what we can do to alleviate the uncertainty, or alternatively, there's no way to alleviate the uncertainty, in which case we now have to make a hard decision in the presence of the data. The assumption is the data is what the data is, what the data are, what the data are. What are you going to do now? But instead, we're not hearing what we need to know. We're not hearing how we get the information we need. We're not hearing how the decision gets made, because we cannot continue like this. It cannot continue. Now, what are the media concerned with? They're concerned with Fauci being mean to Trump. So Fauci was on with Tapper on CNN, and Tapper says, okay, well, should we have locked this thing down earlier, like in February, like South Korea did? And Fauci says, I think it's kind of unfair to compare us to South Korea, actually. That comparison doesn't hold. Here's Fauci attempting to defend the president. Now, the reason that I bring this up is because the headline yesterday was Fauci rips Trump. I'm going to show you the clips that people are talking about. Fauci is deliberately attempting to avoid ripping Trump because he knows that if he pisses off Trump, then Trump is just going to get pissed off and not listen to him. So here is Fauci trying to avoid ripping Trump. The media then printed the headline, Fauci rips Trump. And predictably enough, Trump then retweeted a call to fire Fauci because everything is idiotic and everyone's a moron. Here is Fauci being asked about South Korea and attempting to avoid the comparison.
If you look, could you have done something a little bit earlier? Would have had an impact, obviously. But where we are right now is the result of a number of factors. The size of the country, the heterogeneity of the country. I think it's a little bit unfair to compare us to South Korea, where they had an outbreak in Daegu and they had the capability of immediately, essentially, shutting it off completely in a way that we may not have been able to do in this country. So obviously, it would have been nice if we had a better head start, but I don't think you could say that we are where we are right now because of one factor. It's very complicated, Jake.
Okay, now that is him attempting to avoid we should have just been South Korea. Then Fauci was asked about whether lives could have been saved with earlier implementation. He says, well, I mean, sure. And if you'd shut down the entire economy in December, then you would have saved a lot of lives. But that's not how political decisions get made. This was printed in the papers as Fauci ripping Trump. He's working so hard not to rip Trump here. I mean, what? Just listen to it. He's working desperately hard not to rip Trump because he knows what's going to happen. You rip Trump and then Trump threatens to fire you. Every single person in the administration knows the formula here, and he's attempting to avoid it unsuccessfully.
It's the what would have, what could have. It's very difficult to go back and say that. I mean, obviously, you could logically say that if you had a process that was ongoing and you started mitigation earlier, you could have saved lives. Obviously, no one is going to deny that. But what goes into those kinds of decisions is complicated. But you're right. I mean, obviously, if we had right from the very beginning shut everything down, it may have been a little bit different. But there was a lot of pushback about shutting things down back then.
Okay, so that is him attempting to not rip Trump. The media prints he rips Trump, and then Trump immediately tweets out how he wants to, like, he retweets somebody saying that Fauci should be fired. He said, somebody tweeted out, Deanna for Congress, I don't know who that is, tweeted out, Fauci is now saying that Trump had Trump listen to the medical experts earlier, he could have saved more lives. Fauci was telling people on February 29th there was nothing to worry about. It posed no threat to the U.S. public at large. Time to hashtag fire Fauci. And Trump retweeted that. And then he said, sorry, fake news. It's all on tape. I banned China long before people spoke up. Thank you, OANN. Come on. Just come on.